Today's topic, inputs, outputs, and leveraged work. Okay, areas of focus here in this module will be correct inputs, that acquisition up front, wrong inputs, the admin minutia, working smarter, not harder, leveraged work. Okay, there's an outcome here. The outcome we want you to take from this is realizing that smaller actions provide bigger results if you do the right actions, identify those time killers and increase profit, cut out all the waste, and move the needle far faster. So, in part one here, we're going to talk about inputs, outputs, and leveraged work. Once I finish up the description of this slide, I'm going to cut away to my whiteboard and I'll draw an actual physical picture of what this would look like to give you that mental note in your head to reference to. But let's get started. So, first and foremost, we're going to talk about inputs, small actions, outputs, big result. Okay. We want a small action to create a big result. Okay. And how do we do that? Well, let's talk about a small action on input side. Okay. This is your main target. This is your focus. You want to put as least amount of actions or things that you do to that front input to create a larger output. Okay. So you want to get this right. Acquisition on the front end, for example, that's what creates profit. Okay, that's an input, and it's a small action because that acquisition could be paid advertising, it could be your sales force, it could be many things. But those are actions that don't require you physically to do something. So that acquisition is a small action leveraged to create a big result. Okay. 98% of your time should be spent here, and this creates higher profit margins. And the whole point is this gains us true growth and scalability. Okay. So when we look at the output side of things, this is to win. All right. We kill waste and we just go all in. So we want to define the goals that matter. So we can really move that needle forward. You write these down and clarify how to get there, and anything that's not profit generating goes away. Period. Okay, and we really need to focus on that front part of this. Okay, is defining those profit generating activities to really do the scale. Okay, because at the end of the day, an input, small action, output, big result, that big result equals bigger profits, bigger margins, and scalability, that hockey stick scalability. Okay. Let's talk about the absolute opposite of that, and that's large actions in the input with small results for an output. This is typically always non-revenue generating things. All the admin minutia. It could be checking emails, it could be, messing around on Facebook, it could be getting caught up BSing with other CEOs on the phone, all things that are not profit generating. I had one client of ours, they would spend at least 2 hours a day out shopping for the office for groceries and office supplies. Perfect example of a terrible input. Okay. This should literally be 2% or less of your time should be spent on these kind of actions. Okay. They're bulky, time consuming, and not profit oriented. And this is a do not do moment. Okay. Do not do this because this will impact your business in far more ways than you understand at the moment. So we want to focus that small action input versus the large action input because you get a small output, small result, no profits or very little. Okay, it's not leverage time. It often leads to bankruptcy and a big cash burn, period. And your ROI is horrible. This is really where you have to focus on the things that matter in your business at your level. And that could be a lot of different things. So I'm going to cut away here to my whiteboard, and that I'm going to draw this out a little bit so it's not just in text. It's a lot easier to understand, but I wanted to give you, the kind of the 411 of this before I hit the whiteboard. So I will see you over at the whiteboard in just a second. All right, hey, welcome to my whiteboard. Okay, so let's break down and kind of put that entire concept that we just talked about on the slide. Let's take that now, kind of make a little picture of it so it's maybe a touch easier to understand. Sometimes pictures are worth 1,000 words, right? So, all right, so let's talk about that focused work, working smarter, not harder, and do leveraged work. Okay, so let's talk about the model. Okay, input, output, small input, big output, and big input, small output. Okay, so let's just talk about that. So let's say we have, this is our input, and this is our output. Okay, let's say this is a small input, and then here we have a very large output. Okay, these inputs on their own usually are could be advertising, it could be sales staff, okay, it could be, commissioned folks, because these are all inputs that lead to what? They all lead to money, okay? Those things lead to money. So if we're plugging this input and we have, say it's lead generation going to a sales staff, and that's a small input coming in, and what does this in turn end up creating here? A large output, okay? This means more cash in your pocket, okay? That's what it leads to. And this leads to that scalability factor, okay? Because that's what we're looking for, scalability, okay? So now, the point here is we want to go all in on what really matters and cut all the waste parts out. So let's look at the other side of this, and let's look at the side of it of a large and a small. So now we have a very large input and a small output. Okay. So what do we think that creates? Little profit, right? Very little. Okay. It does not allow scalability. This is where your company just always just baselines out. Okay. And you're always doing a whole bunch of work up front, but it's not the right work. It's not smart leveraged work. Okay. This eventually leads to bankruptcy. That's what that leads to. Leads to bankruptcy at some point. Okay. So obviously, thumbs up here, thumbs down here. Okay. And I always say this should be 98%, and this should be 3%, or 2%, I'm sorry, 2%, okay? All this stuff here is admin stuff. Admin, checking emails, you're on Facebook, you're doing all of these, I call them minutia actions, okay? Because none of this stuff relates to cash. Okay, so I'll tell you the four-star general story. All right, four-star general story. My wife used to work for a four-star general, and there was hardly any of this stuff that he ever did himself. Okay, he had a staff that took care of all of the admin stuff, so he didn't have to do large inputs there, and he could focus on small inputs that would impact the greater military. I know that's not really an example of cash producing, but all this admin stuff, get it off your plate. Hire somebody to take care of that stuff and get it off your plate. Now, we can use the general contractor as another instance here. And he was spending most of his time, his large input was spent running around in Home Depot and picking up wood, supplies, so on and so forth. So he burned large amounts of time here in this large input up front to get a small output, which was, for him, less jobs. Why? Because he's spending more time here than he should be here, out, talking to people, on forums possibly, talking to people, going to referral homes, talking to people, so on and so forth. For him, that is the generating input. Okay, was that. So here, simply, he put somebody in charge to take care of that. He could focus more on his small input here and do more of the work that mattered, that created scalability. Okay, so, like we talked about. So, number one, you got to define your goal that matters and move the needle. This is where you're going to move the needle. Okay? This is not needle moving. All right? So, write it down. Write this stuff down. Use your own small map like this and write it out and, clarify how you're going to get there. Are these your inputs that matter? What are those for you? Okay? And then everything else that doesn't generate money, all this admin garbage, gone. Get it out of here. We don't need it. Okay? Get rid of it. And then really sit down and define every generating activity that you have for money. Okay? And those should be the focuses here. Because that's what's going to create this hockey stick, scalability. Okay? So I hope that makes sense. I know my board's a little messy with writing that down. I am not Picasso, but I wanted to give you just a little visual idea of what I was talking about with the inputs and outputs. Okay? So I'm going to switch back over to slides again, and I think we're going to knock out that 1 minute speed exercise. So we'll see you back on the slides. Okay, welcome back. So here's what we're going to do next. We're going to do what's called a speed exercise. You're going to do this in 1 minute. I don't want you to take a lot of time to process and think. I want the first thing that comes to your mind. Okay, so go ahead and pull out a pen and piece of paper right now. And I want you to write your small actions that create massive results. The top 3 things. Go ahead and write those out. When you're done with that, write out your large actions that create no results. Top 3 things.